Sweet.
I think we are good now.
Bueno, let's roll. All right. Oh, there's an echo. Okay, so you should have some kind of plan, whether it be a JPEG or your CAD draft. It's nicer whenever you have the CAD lines because things will snap, so that'll help you. So we are going to learn how to get things out of AutoCAD. So most of the time y'all have just been sending in the DWG or taking a screenshot of things. That is not the way that you normally get things out of AutoCAD. There is a formal, nice way. We have discussed Paperspace the very first day and the difference. Some of you have accidentally clicked into Paperspace. So these tabs down at the bottom are layout tabs. Those are Paperspace. So some of you have accidentally clicked into this land before. We are going to go through what happens in these pieces of paper, how to set them up, and how to get things out of AutoCAD without doing those screenshots anymore. And so from this point on, screenshots is not the way to go. Cool. Let's go with, I'm going to open a new tab. So you basically have, you normally start with one or two default layout tabs. They'll do this. They'll take the information that's in the file, center it in a pretty little picture on a single sheet of paper. This is like a hypothetical. This will be what your paper looks like whenever you print. The first thing that you have to do is set up and determine what size this paper is and all of the things that it's the same thing as setting up like a Photoshop sheet and things like that. The things that show and display your information are called viewports. So you can select, it'll always have a default one that places itself there. It works like a rectangle, but it's a special like view window into your model space. So these kind of work a lot like InDesign, where you can have an image that's there and you can only be viewing like a small portion of it, and you can shift the item behind that gap or that window into the image that you have. But the nice part about AutoCAD is the purpose of it is that it can be exported and chosen at a specific scale. So you can take your scale bar once you've printed it on whatever size paper, you should be able to take a scale bar and it will measure and be proper and make sense. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the paper settings. Page setup is your command for that. You can also right click on your tab and there's a number of informations here, and page setup manager is what page setup opens. So you can either type or right click and page, it really helps if you type the right page setup, it opens the exact same thing. Okay, everyone type in page setup. You're going to get a dialog box and it will list every layout that you have. So if you see the little plus sign at the bottom left-hand corner, you can add as many, whenever you're not in this dialog box, you can add as many paper spaces as you'd like. This does add memory to your file and potentially slow it down if you're on a slower computer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go, okay, we're in layout 2, you might be in layout 1, so whichever layout you're on, you're going to go and choose that one, and then you're going to choose modify. If you look at before you choose that, it tells you what plot size it is, its orientation, and that's about it. So I'm going to choose modify. And this is where one of those JPEGs that I had you download is a good reference for later. You don't have to use it now. Why does it default to paint? So I've made this, it's a screenshot of what all the settings should look like. There are only, I want to say 3 things that you are changing within there. So this explains why for each thing, and I'll go over that, but this is a reference for later that's sitting in your exercise. So the first thing that you change is your printer or your plotter. You can export this straight to a printer, but then if you don't catch kinks and things that fall out in between the interface of this to a printer, it's kind of a pain to have to adjust settings for printing directly in here. So it's ideal to always digitally print. So if you do the drop down, there's a billion options of getting this to a PDF as well as a real printer. The PDF option that I have found the least glitchy, the smallest file sizes, and overall, like I find the best, and I use professionally as well, DWG to PDF. It seems silly because there's one that says Adobe PDF and a billion other choices. DWG to PDF, best one. So that's the one you should be using for all of these things. The next thing that you change is your paper size. This is very similar to like a print window for any other program. I prefer, and I think it's best practice to use full bleed, which means if you look at the paper space back here, if you see this dashed line, that's your like margins, the same way on windows. I prefer working on a full extent for the viewport and those kind of things, and you can choose your margins later or deal with the printer's margins later. So we are going to choose, let's do, it's 8.5 by 11, and you scroll until you find the right one. 8.5 by 11, full bleed. And then I don't think it matters which one you choose, as long as, so if I choose the first one, it says landscape, I can always twist it to be portrait over here in your drawing orientation. So choose either, and we can come back and fix it if needed. So it's needs to be ANSI full bleed, A11 by 8.5. Then you need to check down in drawing orientation and do landscape. The last thing that we change is the plot style table. We'll review that in a second before doing that portion, because this requires you to import and download the CTV file that you couldn't open that we gave to you. That is going to sit in here, and it manipulates the line work that whenever it prints out to a DWG. So we're going to leave this as is. When you do a page setup manager, it means this is the default settings. Every single time that you type in plot and you try to get things out, these will be the settings. If you skip doing this and type in plot every time you'd like to export, you will have to change the settings every single time if you don't do this process. So doing this first is ideal. So you push OK. And now if I see it says device name, it says plotter, it has more information now. So I'm going to close out. And now my page has changed size. If you can see, there's a bigger margin between that viewport edges and elsewhere. Does anyone need help? Does anyone page setup? Type in page setup, or you can right click on the layout. For some of you, so this is where the confusion was. Some of you don't have anything showing in here. It could mean that in your model space, you've accidentally drawn something out in the abyss at some point, accidentally imported a JPEG or something. And when it tries to default, it does this and you don't see something. So don't worry about that right now if you can't see anything in that viewport. Even if it's, if you don't see the grid either, so like this grid, for instance, that kind of stuff. So don't worry about it. Just start with the page. That's all that matters. The stuff on it will all be deleted in a second. So page setup, modify. For the layout tab that you're on, you're going to choose the printer plotter. It's going to be DWG to PDF. All of this stuff is also listed on this document as well. So DWG to PDF. Whoa. Then paper size is your ANSI, full bleed, 8.5 by 11. It's just literally an 8.5 by 11, and then it says full bleed. So just scroll up till you start seeing full bleed, and then choose one of the 8.5 by 11s. Make sure in the orientation it says landscape. That is all you need to set right now. Cool. Everyone good? Push OK. And close. Push OK and close once you've got all those things done. So if you take a polyline, even though this file is set to feet, and so should yours. So if it is not currently, type in units. Some of you, a lot of you, turn in your stuff. And it is still set to inches. So make sure it says feet. When you're in paper space, whether it's inches, feet, millimeters, doesn't matter what. When you type in like your polyline, for instance, and I start drawing a line, if you look at the numbers it says like 9. That's 9 inches. So when you're in paper space, it's measuring based off of inches, whether it doesn't matter what your units are set to, because this is a physical piece of paper it's showing you. Okay. So for anyone that wants to check, do a polyline real quick, click from one side to the other and make sure that it says 11 or 8.5, and make sure. I just realized this is supposed to be portrait. Perfect. So page setup. Make sure this is portrait. This is practice. So open your page setup and go change this to portrait. So the next thing we're gonna do is I hate the default viewport because it doesn't snap to anything. If you grab the grips of this, just like a rectangle, it cannot snap. Whew. Be careful with what you click. If you click the grips anywhere over here, it can't snap to the edges of that page, which is just really messy and not precise. And the point of this is precision. So I delete it. So select your viewport and just push delete. Select the outside boundary or draw a window, delete it. This is why it doesn't matter if you can't see your stuff on it, because we're just going to start from scratch when it comes to those. So select your viewport. There's something. Okay. So now we have a big blank page. The windows into your model space, you need one of those on the page. You can have as many as you want. You can stuff them in here. You can organize. You can also draw line work on your page. You can put text on this page. But we're just going to put one big viewport because we just want to have our plan and that's it. So we're going to type viewport. I'm pretty sure you can't type viewport. Yeah, cool. So viewport is the short for it and the most common. Pretty sure if I did, yeah. So you can type in the whole thing. I never typed the whole thing, but viewport or viewport will get you this dialog box. I tried doing research on the difference between this and that, and I can't find the difference. So we're going to choose single. That's what I normally default to, but I'm pretty sure they both act pretty much the same for your purposes. So when you type viewport, this dialog, everyone have this dialog box open? Yes. And you're going to choose single. It's the only thing you really need to change. There's other things associated with it. You don't need to mess with that stuff. The goal is to have these little windows edges disappear, basically. Just want your line work to be on a page and that's it. So push OK. Now you'll see in your command prompt bar, it starts with like specify first corner, just like a rectangle. So we're going to draw just like a rectangle, except there's no snaps because you can't snap to the edge of the page, which sucks. So instead, we're going to use coordinate systems. So if you hover over the bottom left-hand corner, if you've got your dynamic input on, you'll see these numbers. If you don't right now, it's okay because I'll tell you which numbers to type right now. I normally do a guessing game when I do this anyways. So I start with 0, 0 is what I type, and it will immediately put it at that bottom left-hand corner. So 0, comma, and it locks the first box once you put the comma in, 0, and then push enter. That starts your first corner of the rectangle or box. So you'll see it's draggable after this, okay? Then based off how big your paper is, if you hover over here, see this says 8.5 by 11. If I don't have dynamic input, I guess I either put 11, comma 8.5 or 8.5 by 11 and hope it's the right one, and I will redraw it if I needed to. So this one is 8.5, comma 11. So 8.5, comma 11. And now it makes it perfect all the way to the edges, snapped. The whole paper is one big viewport. Okay, Jess, you good up there?
Yes.
Okay. So the next part is we're going to click in. Double clicking into this land is then modifies only when you zoom in and out. It's like you're in model space and you're navigating. You can edit model space from this viewport. So everything, if I were to delete things here, it deletes things from model space that you drew. So when you're in here, you have to be careful. To get out of here, you double click out. Okay. It is very easy to accidentally get stuck inside of these. So if I zoom here to where I can't see the edges of my page and I double click in, the only way to get out is you have to type in PS or P space. It's paper space to say, hey, I want out of the viewport. So PS, and then you can scroll and leave that space. Okay. I believe you can also take MS and it lets you edit. So I don't know why you need a command to double click into something, but if MS will do model space and activate that viewport again, you can also select it and right click and you can go into maximize, which takes it and stretches across. Overall, double click. It's the way to go, and PS just saves your butt whenever you get stuck. The next part is scale. So when you select this, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner where your status bar is, this arbitrary number is the scale of your drawing. If you double click into your viewport and zoom in and out, you'll see that number down at the bottom right-hand corner changes, okay? Because your scale is changing. It is a random decimal because it is an arbitrary, like not nice scale when you just randomly zoom. For those of you that have line work drawn or your JPEG in, if you double click on your scroll wheel by pushing down on it, it should center your window and zoom things. If there are bonus things, which I drew bonus things in here, it will make things not centered. So if you've got extra stuff, you might have to shift it manually yourself. So I'm going to do that again. So if I double click with my scroll wheel, like physically click this, it will center all of your objects. If you have bonus things, you can zoom in or use pan. So you can hold down that scroll wheel and pan to center your objects in there. Okay. The next part is we've got it centered. Now we need to make it to a specific scale. AutoCAD has default scales sitting within it. Generally you use, so engineering scales are the pretty nice even numbers. Architectural are those fraction ones, right? So your two different scale bars. When you're in feet, generally you're using the nice, pretty clean numbers that are engineering. For this, I want to say we did 1 to 10. Let me check. I think I'm right. I could be wrong. 1 to 10. It's got to be 1 to 10. So you're going to click. This is where some things are going to go awry for a couple of you. If you didn't set your units properly, if you did not scale your drawing properly, or if there's any other, there's a couple of y'all that have these weird kinks that in your page setup where the numbers are astronomical for some reason. I'm guessing that might be a problem too, and we will work on that in a sec after we've gotten everyone through this and started on an assignment. But if you go down to where your status bar is and click on the scale number, it gives you all those default ones. So we're going to choose the one we want, which is 1 to 10. Click it. Supposed to have made it 11 by 17. We're really going to practice this page setup part. Page setup. Modify. I made it like it was so simple that I didn't write instructions for myself, and I really should have apparently. So we're going to scroll and we're going to do page setup, modify, and then we're going to go to our paper size. And we're going to scroll just a little bit up and choose one more. Hi, Jess.
Hey, one of the students doesn't have the scale window in her status bar.
Okay, at the bottom right hand corner where the 3 lines are, if you click and make sure that find the one that is scale related and it should turn it on. It's one of the ones that she doesn't have turned on, or they
What
don't.
is the name?
That's a good question. Let me check. Hold on. I can see if I don't have it memorized. I'll check that
I
one.
didn't see anything that was like weightless scale.
Yeah. So ANSI full bleed B instead. That's what everyone needs to change to. Cool. Push OK and close. Let me check. Is it auto scale? It's auto scale.
Oh, it's back.
Is the viewport selected?
Oh, sorry.
You're good. Okay. So now our viewport went in here and we don't have to make a new one because we know exactly how many inches, which way we need to go. So I can click a snap, turn on my ortho, I'll click one of those grids, and I can go straight up and I can type in 6 for going up and then enter. And I can click this grip and turn ortho on. And then I can hover and it's 2.5 inches, right, to get to the right page size. So 2.5, enter. Okay, I'm going to do that again. I click my viewport. It is now just a rectangle in your brain. Consider it a rectangle. Click one of the top grips, one of them. Turn on your ortho. So everything goes straight up and it's not, because this is like a rectangle in terms of you can skew it and not be a rectangle anymore. So you want it to go straight up, north, hover up there, 6, enter. Click the next grip, either this one or this one, doesn't matter, as long as it's one of the right-hand side ones. Click it, hover, type 2.5. So now we have an 11 by 17. Because if you look and it's selected in the bottom right, it says 1 to 10, we know it's scaled. So we are only going to use pan to center this now. So I'm gonna hold my mouse, my scroll wheel, I'm gonna double click in, hold the scroll wheel for the hand, and I'm gonna center this myself, because I know it is 1 to 10. If you want to, you can use the double click on the scroll wheel that centers it, and then you have to go push your scale again down in the bottom right. Either way, once you've adjusted, you need to check the bottom right-hand side and make sure it still says 1 to 10, because half the time when you try to like, scoot it around and then you're like, oh, look better, and you hit the scroll wheel and you think, oh, I got it back to where it should be. If you look at the bottom right, it is not 1 to 10 anymore. It's very easy to mess that up. Okay, so 1 to 10. For anybody's that is completely like the scale, something is askew. There's a couple that I've started a new file, set to feet and copied the line work and reset up the page real quick. But if you don't have time for that, just get it centered and on the page for right now, and we can work on it after we start the assignment related. So the more section preppy stuff. Does that make sense? The next part is, we got one more part of this before we're ready to plot and done with the exercise and moving into the assignment stuff. I'm going to go ahead and explain it since she's talking to somebody. Your assignment is just going to be drawing a section and plotting it. It's going to be section A, so one of your short ones on this plan, so it's not anything crazy. And a lot of y'all have not read the stuff on Canvas and just like thoroughly gives you a lot of instructions. Yes, we missed some things, but gives a lot of thorough instructions on what things should look like and how they should look like for a good, like standard looking section. We're trying to give you good best practices for drawing sections without forcing you to draw a very detailed, nice section that is past what you should need to do for a hypothetical section in the first place. The goal is to get you better at drafting, be able to draw a section from one of your plans that you have inside of AutoCAD and be able to plot it nicely. So we're going to practice the plotting via your assignment, but the part that's new is being able to reference the current line work or plan that you have, whether it be a JPEG or AutoCAD line work, and be able to draw a section from that and cut from it. So that's what your assignment is going to be for this week. It should be pretty short, and you should have a decent amount of time in here. And I'm going to walk you through setting up the file part, and then it's just drafting and plotting is what y'all will be doing on your own. So it shouldn't be too nitty gritty. Jess, are you at a good place or no? Perfect. Okay, last part to get this out the door. Everything's fun colors. Everything should not be fun colors when it leaves AutoCAD. We have told you what color to make all of your layers for a really specific reason, and you had no clue why. So a CTB is the thing that you downloaded. So make sure that you already have that chilling somewhere in here. Let's see if I have it. Did I download it? Nope. Cool. I'm gonna push download. Make sure you have the CTB. You'll see it has a little AutoCAD thing, like it knows it's part of AutoCAD. That's where it belongs. It's cool. The CTB is also called a pen style and also called a plot style. It is all three of those things. Plot styles are the equivalent of picking up different pens as you draft a plan. So you've learned a little bit of line hierarchy. So you probably know, for instance, like I've reiterated, hardscape is more important than softscape whenever, generally, when you get a vegetation plan, then it might be different, or a planting plan. But hardscape is more important because it is thicker, denser, it's more expensive. It's the first thing that's going to go down, and then vegetation gets put in later in terms of construction. So for those things, you have a thicker line, right? So this is the difference between what color you pick in AutoCAD is the difference between picking up a Sharpie or a Micron, those fine point versus a fat one. So something like your footprint in AutoCAD, that was made cyan. Cyan is one of the thickest lines. Versus red is one of the thinnest. How you'll remember some of, we've given some reference. So in your assignment, I wrote out, where'd it go? It's right here. I wrote out red is the thinnest, magenta is the thickest, and it goes up from there so that you can remember. You generally won't have to worry about that. We're telling you what colors things should be, but you need to understand how this thing works because you're using this CTB file, this plot style, pen style. You're using this, so you need to understand how it works, and you will use these in your future, I guarantee. So if you look at your colors, the index colors that we told you to use, 1 through 9 are index colors. The ones for this plot style, the one that you're being provided, interprets red as the thinnest, then it gets thicker to yellow, thicker for green, thicker, thicker, and we stop at magenta. Then for hatches and other things like that, the plot style interprets any color with the number. If it's 100, through 200. Any of those numbers, the last 2 digits is the transparency. So we had you set hatches to either be 15, which is the only rule breaker from this stupid CTV. This is for my office that I worked at. So that 15 comes in at like a 50% transparency versus 110 is going to be a 10% transparency. 120 is 120%. We've already told you which ones they're going to be. So you don't have to have this like memorized, but it's good to understand once again. So hatches are super like insignificant. They're like detailed, like fluff to make something, to show something, but you don't want it jumping out on a plan, right? So those are going to be like your lighter things. Where you set these things is where we skipped in the page setup manager. So I'm going to show you real quick. Up here in the top right corner, this is where all of your plot styles are. There's default ones that come with AutoCAD, but we have given you one that is more specific to get a more specific line hierarchy rather than just grayscale or monochrome. I'm going to show you real quick on the assignment. I can make this larger. And it opens it in Paint. Okay, so the first is how you view it. This is with no plot style. If you just printed it, it's going to show up with those pretty colors. The next, if you set to grayscale, it generally just takes an interpretation of your lines and makes them a shade of gray based off those line work. Then monochrome is the next one over. I plotted as an example. It makes things just black and white. That's pretty much it. You can tell that there's not a lot of hierarchy there. You can't tell what's the most important, what's not important, those kind of things. It's difficult to read those first 3 versus your last one is plotted with the CTV that you've been provided. So you'll see like your building is a dark, dark, dark. Your hatches are kind of faded and kind of part of that grayscale. And then your line work, your pavement edges and those kind of things, they're dark. They're 100% black, but they change in thickness based off of like, if you look at the line for your furnishing, it's a little bit thinner. And if you look at the pavement, it's the world's ittiest bittiest thicker. AutoCAD stores all of this information. So if I look at that, you don't need this part, it stores all this information basically saying, hey, this color, every time I see this color, make it this thickness. Every time I see this color, make it this thickness. So it's really interpreting and reading all of this stuff. So that's why it's important that you have things on the right layer and they're the right color. It's really important so that it plots the right color. You don't want something that really doesn't matter to be like really black and bold. So we have to figure out, if you look at mine, I have this sitting in here because I've already used this file and loaded a CTV. You should not have LARCH plot style. So type in your page setup, choose modify, and I'm pretty sure no one should have it in there, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is it from downloading it? I swear, AutoCAD's getting smarter and smarter. We're still going to go over how to properly install it so that you know if you end up on another computer, how to put it into that computer. Because if you go onto your personal computer and this doesn't show up, you need to be able to plot it with the right plot style. So the style manager is the command, which is really silly because all it does is open your file explorer. But it opens it down the path of where it saves every default thing for the program. So it's really difficult to navigate to this. If you look in here, that LARCH plot style is not sitting in there. So you need to go to your downloads and you're going to go find the LARCH plot style and you're going to copy it. Control C, and you're going to go to where the style manager took you and you're just going to paste it in here. That just sticks it on the computer so it's permanently there and it can read that plot style. That's all it is. Okay. If you have LARCH plot style, it is probably still better to go and place this in there just in case. I wouldn't be surprised if you tried to plot and it didn't work just because it's not sitting in the interface folder. So to do that again, it's style manager, styles manager, opens file explorer. All you do is copy one file from one place to the next. Control C, Control V, paste it in there. Okay. Okay. And then the last thing is you do not export. You do not export to PDF. It negates all these fun settings that we set in that page manager. plot is the command that you use. It seems counterintuitive when you are exporting to a PDF, but plot is the command that is ideal for this setup. There's a default pop-up that comes. We're not going to go over that batch plotting. So you could do not show again and continue to a single sheet. Don't worry about batch plotting. So continue single. Okay. You'll notice all your settings are set here because you set them up in your page manager. So you shouldn't have to worry about anything. You've got your plot style should be set to LARCH plot style. Plotter should be DWG to PDF and ANSI full bleed 11:17 at portrait. Okay, push OK. Then you are going to go to some nice location on your computer and you're going to save this, the prettiest of names, based off the deliverables. Y'all have been doing really awesome with that, by the way, for your assignment. So props for actually getting that habit and getting things named. A majority of y'all are naming things perfect. And I know it's silly and small. That silly and small thing is screwed up a lot. So make sure that you take your deliverable name it nicely. Size 4, right? Yeah, am I right? I hope I'm right. And then I'm plotting. Save it where it belongs. Yeah. When you do print your PDF, for those of you that things look ugly, if they don't look the way that the example has looked, so let's print mine. There is some hope. That's the best part. So first of all, every time you plot in the future, turn off your XREFs. You don't want that stuff sitting behind. So you can see mine is nested in here and it wasn't linked. So that's what that box is in the ugly text. So make sure you turn those things off whenever you submit. You don't have to do it for this, I don't care. But make sure you turn those off in the future in your layer manager. But if you look, this doesn't look the best, but if I zoom into 100%, with vector data, sometimes the way it interprets PDFs, it kind of shows you a more ugly version. So if I zoom to 100%, it looks pretty nice and there's a hierarchy. So hopefully it improves for some. If your plot looks teeny tiny down in a big abyss, it's most likely because you were in model space when you chose plot. You need to be in the layout, in the paper to say, hey, this is the paper I am plotting. So that is one tip there. Yeah. Those of you that when you look at your model, when you look at your PDF and it looks muddled and you can't tell, make sure you go to 100% first before judging it. So go up to the top in your PDF reader, 100% before judging it. Okay.
Tina,
Yes.
I have a fun one for you. One of the students has the CTB in and it's still coming out in color.
Make sure that you've got, let's see, what? Make sure that the box that says plot with plot styles is on. This land, by the way, these little check boxes, for the most part, don't touch them. It is not fun, but if you do touch them or things are going wrong, look at them, read them thoroughly, and try to understand them before clicking randomly to try and solve your problems. Into helping out set up with the assignment. If yours looks decent, and whenever it comes to what color your hatch is or whatever, if it's ugly or not, the works, we are asking that you submit your DWG for this EX as well as this plot. So I will be able to tell if it's you plotted it wrong or your file just had like a bad color that you didn't manage to catch. The point is that you plotted it right and you tried it during the class. That's not going to be the thing that dictates if you accidentally made your hatch the wrong color and it's black and horrible, that's totally fine. The point is that you learned how to plot today. So don't worry about fixing all the nitty gritties of your site plan to make it right. If you want to fix things later, totally can for resubmissions and getting some point backs. Cool. Bueno. We're going to move into making the file for your assignment. Okay. New file, completely from scratch. Cool. What do we do? First thing, units. It's going to be, we're going to put our plan in here and we're going to make a section off of it. So we're going to work with feet. It is rare that you need the inches unless you're making details and small nitty gritty stuff. So you're almost doing feet every single time. Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to XREF in our plan, but it will not be your JPEG, it's gonna be your DWG will be XREF'd in here. So you're putting an AutoCAD file inside of an AutoCAD file, okay? But we're using the same commands and system as we did for a JPEG, okay? For those of you that are actively fixing your plan, I suggest stopping real quick so that you make sure you're set up for the assignment. So we're going to type in XREF. Open that dialog box up, okay? And in the drop down, make sure yours is set to this little image, or go to the drop down and do attach DWG. Okay. Then you are going to navigate and find your CAD file for this plan. Okay, so your EX3, not the one, no, it's A3, my bad. There it is. So your assignment 3, push OK. Then we're gonna specify the scale we're gonna leave alone, okay? Because it's a plan that we know is hopefully the right scale and drawn right. We're leaving this one alone. Then insertion point, we'll just go ahead and put it at 0, 0. It's a good habit that anytime you XREF DWGs, you just sit it at 0, 0. And then I don't think we're touching anything else, and we're not rotating it. So we just wanted to stick it in there, and we don't want to touch anything else once it's stuck in there, okay? We want it to be exactly the way it looks in our file that we drew it. So push OK once you have all of these unchecked. So uncheck, uncheck, uncheck. Should look like this. Good, good, OK. And your plan should be sitting in there. When you XREF a DWG, it basically becomes almost uneditable. There is editable capabilities, but it is one big, it looks like a block, basically. The same way your blocks and groups have. It has a little grip to use. When you click it, the same way as your JPEGs, it comes up with information. You can crop and clip these. You don't really need to do that stuff for this one, okay? So from this point, I can do things. So if I were to select this and modify it, if I rotate it, for instance, it doesn't mess with, you do not need to rotate it. I'm just showing you as an example. If I do this, it's not screwing up the original plan. So it lets me use this as a reference without messing up the original file. And it makes it to where like you don't accidentally select all the little things that you've drawn. You can just use it as a reference, but instead of it being a JPEG, you can now snap to it, which makes it a lot easier for you to draw things with precision, okay? So does everybody have their plan XREF'd in? Jess, get up there.
Yes.
Bueno. Okay. So the next part is, by the way, this works the same as your JPEGs. If like things aren't found, for instance, like the image from your XREF is not found, that's the image in your file, not one that you've placed in here. So that's the nested one that I never relinked, but the same way applies if you update your plan and save it and do something nice to it and change it. Like if I draw a line in here and I push save, and I go to this file, sometimes it auto does it, sometimes it prompts you down at the bottom, or you can do down here and you'll say, it says like needs refresh over here. I closed it. It says need refresh over here. If I right click and do reload, it'll refresh it. I say, no, I don't want to, care about it. You have to say, hey, it shows you the differences between your last and your new one. So just click this checkbox at the top. It's kind of confusing and dumb. If you zoom in, you'll see that new line is there. So it auto updates and stuff like that. So if you make changes and you needed to make changes and you want to fix them, that's how you do it. Okay, so for drawing sections, it's pretty simple. You basically just draw reference lines. So we're doing section A for your assignment. So it's this line right here. If it helps you to, draw a line across or something like that. So we're doing this line right here. So everywhere it cuts across there, you need to show what it looks like when it's chopped through, okay? How you can do that, you can do 2 different ways. I personally like to draw a line above the plan. And then I will do lines as markers. So if I went to the center of this tree and turned my ortho on and did it straight up, then I know this is where the tree goes, right on this line. if I draw a line at the intersection, so I'm going to turn my OSNAP that has intersection on, so I can find spots where it crosses directly over that line. If I draw this straight up and I draw the other side of this plant space, right, from here to here, I know from this spot to this spot is, and I delete those, I know like this spot is plant vegetation, for instance. Like I just made that box in that space, that's going to be my vegetation spot. And then you'll go along and build your sections. I know y'all have done sections by hand. So it's the same concept, but instead we're going to get precision and measurements involved. We've assigned a specific width. So for vegetation and lawn, those kind of things, that's going to have your earth hatch below it. And this is all written in your instructions. So don't get overwhelmed by this or memorize it, but read your instructions properly on your assignment. But that needs to be a foot deep. So I type 1. So I was close. So it needs to be a foot deep versus when I draw a piece of gravel. So I'm going to go to that intersection, draw it up. This intersection here, draw it up. When I do gravel, it's only going to be, I think it was 6 inches, so it's 0.5. So this spot I need perpendicular, and this is not thorough, you know, I'm going through the basics so that you know generally what to do in the process, and then we can help you out over the next hour to get you through this stuff. So this one, right, is only 6 inches, and then your flagstone or your stepping stones or whatever, those are only 3, so it's 0.25. So when you draw those, they'll end up being like this, basically sitting within that gravel, and you'll have hatches sitting in these areas. We have provided you, let's see. Nope. It's assignment 3. It's not assignment 3. I'm in the wrong one. I'm really stuck in assignment 3 in my brain for some reason. Where is it? Jess, do you got the blocks file in you?
Oh,
Cool. I'll add that in a second. So we have a file for you guys provided. So you do not have to make where trees are. You do not have to make your trees. We're going to give you trees. There's 4 different drawn out trees. And then people, you're going to be required to put a certain number of humans in there. Those placement of that is up to you. It's not nothing crazy. And then the last thing is the fountain, so that you don't have to, the little circles offset next to the arbor trellis thing. This one. Those we provided to you, and it's the line work for it. You need to block them yourself, but that way you don't have to draw anything from scratch. So like the tree, you'll select the stuff, you'll block it, and then you'll put the line work inside of it on colors. So this is where it's a little different in the assignment, rather than it being for sections and details. A lot of the time in offices, they don't make a list of things that say like L wall, L this, L that. Like they don't have a big list. They do it based off of colors because there's far less elements and things. So you will be placing things on the layer green or the layer red instead. And we've given you a list of the layers you need and what layer each thing goes on as well. So it's not a guessing game involved there. But it's based off what color, because you want things to be thicker or thinner based off of when you plot it, so that there is a hierarchy associated with that section. So it's associated with the colors that would work for the plot style that you just learned how to do, so that when you do plot this to turn it in, it will look pretty and hopefully have a nice line hierarchy if you follow the rules. So with this guy, I think we gave you instructions for anything past a certain point. It needs to be like a little bit more faded than something because it's behind the section line by a lot, like the elevation. So like this tree, and this tree would ideally be like 115 versus this tree, and this tree would be like 125 or something, depending on what your requirements are. One is darker than the other, and we also go over that in your assignment as well. I don't know. So we kind of visually drew it out for you. If I can get to it. There it is. So any blocks that are in this little zone, you'll make 125. And any blocks in this zone, you'll make 110. So so it fades in the back kind of deal. And then I think your people are pre-blocked. So once you make the nice layer on your file, you can drop these in and they'll be the right color. And these are already blocked too. So your trees are the only ones that you need to block, but you're given all that stuff. So you don't have to draw it from scratch. You're basically just drawing like lots of rectangles and they just need to measure properly. Okay. So I'm going to let y'all go to start doing that and start working on your assignment. Make sure you read through thoroughly. And then I'm also going to work on putting this on your assignment because it got left off. So, but you can do plenty without having those right now. Okay. Get going. I forgot to talk about how your layers will look different when you have an XREF inside the drawing. So when you open your layer properties, if you see there's a bunch of grayed out layers, these are all the ones that go to your XREF. So they can be turned on and off, which is really nice. So if you wanted to freeze like your hatches, for instance, you don't need to see those. You can freeze them in here. So you have to extend it really far out to actually read what the heck things are called. And my layers are not named the nice things that you have them because I went down a different path. But you can go in and you can freeze. So there's hatch. I can freeze that for the XREF. This is where I told you when you first learn your layer management that you could close this little guy over here. This lets you filter out and only look at what you want to look at. So if you only want to look at the layers that are not your XREF ones, you can do all non-XREF ones. And then you're back to your just like all the layers that are in this file. And then if you want to look at your XREF file ones, they're in there as well. Okay. So go to all non-XREF layers if you want to just see the ones you're working with in this file. Let me close this up real quick and then I will answer. Okay, I'm going to close the Zoom real quick. I'm going to send out links for scheduling Calendly office hour things. If you can do it in an email, I'd appreciate it because a lot of the stuff, if y'all attempt to type it out or send a quick screenshot, I can probably answer the question pretty quick without needing a whole meeting. But if you have questions on resubmissions and fixing things, as well as this assignment, anything like that, shoot us an email, shoot us a message, and I will be sending out the invites for that.